Hi, my name is Adriana, and today I will be doing a review of Thunderhead by Preston and Child. As usual, I'll be splitting up my reviews into spoiler and non-spoiler. The non-spoiler part of this review is probably going to end up being a little short because this book is kind of a mystery thriller, so I'm going to try to be very careful to not ruin anything in my non-spoiler review. So I will start that non-spoiler review now. If you've read this book already, I'll put in a timestamp where you can go jump ahead to the spoiler review if you'd like. Thunderhead is a part of the larger Pendergast Universe written by Preston and Child. This is a Nora Kelly specific protagonist novel. So this is actually book 0 of the Nora Kelly series within the Pendergast universe. Book 1 is Old Bones, and they will be coming out with Scorpion Tail, the second Nora Kelly novel, in a few months, I believe. So this does fit into kind of the overall universe, but I personally haven't read any Pendergast specific novel yet. I've only read Old Bones and now Thunderhead. I'm gonna start trying to work my way through the whole Pendergast series. So I'm starting with Relic now. But I think it's okay to kind of do some of these out of order, but I would highly suggest reading Thunderhead before you jump into Old Bones, and most likely before you jump into Scorpion Tail, because I think Thunderhead does provide a lot of really good background for Nora Kelly as a character. So jumping into Thunderhead, it is, like I said, an archaeological focused kind of historical mystery and also modern day mystery, which I'm a huge sucker for. I love kind of correlating old-timey mysteries with something spooky going on in the modern time that the book is written. So the kind of old-timey archaeological mystery is Nora Kelly's father went missing a couple decades ago, and he went missing on the search for this hidden city of gold called Kivara in the American Southwest, and she suddenly receives a letter from him like 10 or 15 years later, and so now she's going to try to follow his steps to find this city of gold. Her house gets broken into when she finds this letter by these strange half-wolf men, and they're trying to find this letter, and along the way are trying to keep her from finding this ancient archaeological city. So it's a really great mystery. It was actually kind of spooky at times. I'm kind of a wimp. I actually had to put the book down a couple of times because I was a little freaked out. So if you're a wimp like me, I guess just be prepared for that. So trying not to get into anything too deep so I don't spoil anything in this part of the video. It's a really cool story about, this young archaeologist with a group of other established and less established archaeologists making their way through these crazy canyons, each of their developments as their own individual characters and kind of how they function as a group. You get to see like a really fun budding romance between two of the characters. And you kind of get to see how these mysterious wolfmen come to be and what they are and what's going on. So I thought it was a really fun read. I had a really great time reading it, and I would highly recommend it for anybody who has any sort of passing interest in archaeology or somebody who just enjoys fun thriller novels. And especially, it's really fun to read a female lead who, she's strong and capable, but still somewhat feminine. So I think it's a really great read, and I would highly recommend. So yeah, I think, like I said, I want to keep this non-spoiler as I can, and I think that's about all I can say personally without getting into spoilers. So if you haven't read the book yet, go read it. If you have read the book, stick around, and I'm going to jump into the spoiler part of this review. All right, so I spent the entirety of this book thinking this was gonna end up being like a supernatural kind of thing. I thought like these wolfmen were like legitimate werewolves. And so I was like kind of expecting like a magic tilt to it, but then I was pleasantly surprised that it was much more secular and more like scientific. I don't know. I enjoyed that part of it. And as I said in my non-spoiler part, I really loved Nora as a character. I think Smithback is really great as a character. I think their romance is super cute, and I love that. I'm a big fan of like the trope of, people coming together after surviving something super difficult like the way they did. I think the rest of the characters in the group of archaeologists, I think, felt a little one-dimensional, but I guess that makes sense. Like, you don't want to spend a bunch of time writing characters that are just going to end up dying. When I first read the Dr. Goddard character, like, I think that's like within the first like 5 chapters that Nora goes and talks to Dr. Goddard to get the money for this expedition. I honestly thought he was going to end up being the bad guy like the entire time. I was like, this guy's way too nice. Like, he's got to be the bad guy. But turns out he was fine. Turns out his daughter was the crazy psycho. I'm still not sure how I feel about Sloane as a character. I guess I kind of understand her motivations, but at the same time, I'm not a huge fan of just the women be crazy or daddy issues kind of trope. I don't know. Jury's out on Sloane for me as a villain. I don't know if she was super necessary to have as a villain. I think the Wolfmen were plenty villainous for me, and like I said, kind of freaked me out sometimes. I ended up having to put the book down because I was like, ooh, this is a little too much for me on a Wednesday night. I also really like how, Nora was always hammering in, there's no gold at Kivara, there's no gold at Kivara, there's no gold at Kivara, and she ended up being like 100% right, that it was just, this super rare pottery that Sloane and her dad were after. I think Preston and Giles do an incredible job of building tension throughout the entire time you're in Kivara. I mean, I was going back and like taking notes on each chapter, and I kind of forgot how much time you really spend with these characters traveling through canyons and just doing surveys once they get to the city. You really spend a lot of slow time with these characters, just kind of seeing them interact with their environment, but the whole time you're kind of held on this tension of, first off, will they find it? Does it exist? Are they wasting their time? Are they killing, horses and putting themselves at risk for no reason? And then once, again, and like as they're going through, they're finding these reverse spirals. Everything's kind of weird. They get to Pete's ruin, and it's, they're finding, a young girl was slaughtered and blood on the walls, and so it's like very kind of a creepy, tensiony suspension, or I guess suspense kind of building, even though it's a very slow build and it's a very slow plot. 80% of the book is just traveling on horseback and archaeological surveys. And to have that much tension be built through that long of a portion of the plot, I think is really commendable. I found Skip's plotline to be a little redundant, I guess. I mean, maybe it helped in building some of that suspense a little bit, because you realize that these, wolfmen, skinwalkers, are also, keeping track of, Skip back home, as well as Nora attacking her house, cutting Skip's brakes, kind of watching both sides of this. I didn't think it was super necessary, though. I think, I just didn't find Skip's plotline super necessary. It wasn't unappreciated. I think he's an interesting character. And, maybe he'll show up more in as the Nora Kelly series kind of progresses. So it was good to get a baseline of him now, but I didn't think that we really needed to see, I mean, not that we had that much of Skip, but it just seemed like kind of a waste because we didn't get into him too deeply, but we also, I just think it would have been better if we had either expanded on his plot line or just not had it at all. It was just kind of a weird amount of Skip for me. And I think the whole archaeological intrigue of, you know, the Aztecs ended up, you know, becoming this ruling class over the Anasazi in this one particular location, I thought ended up being kind of a cool twist at the end. You know, the whole manufacturing of this corpse powder, and that ended up being their utter downfall, I think was a really cool conclusion to that plot line. But I did have in kind of one of my notes early on, or one of my annotations early on in the book, when they were talking about Nora's old projects and how she just kept like adding on new projects, that I thought, you know, they might end up using kind of her inability to finish a project all the way through as her fatal flaw. But in the, you know, when she decides to cut the expedition off at Kivara, it ends up being, you know, the right decision. If they had been able to get out of that canyon a little earlier, they could have avoided a lot of turmoil with those wolfmen. So she kind of ends up being punished for making the right decision, even though I guess you could say that not finishing projects is kind of one of her flaws academically. But it's hard to say that it would have been a fatal flaw for her, because it ended up being the right decision in the long run. They should have hightailed it out of there earlier if they could have. And like I said, to go deeper into Sloane, I like that she didn't just go all crazy and, you know, kill Smithback and like everybody else. But again, I'm just not a huge fan of that whole daddy issues thing. I think it's kind of played out. I mean, I guess, again, this book was written in the 90s, so maybe this didn't feel as played out as it does now. There weren't as many feminist critics out there. But I think, surprisingly enough, for being written in the 90s, Nora Kelly is a really interesting character. I mean, she's not just a straight badass, but she's also not a damsel in distress. She's, you know, intelligent, but makes mistakes. She can be, you know, short-sighted sometimes. So I think she's a cool, well-rounded character, and I'm really happy to have read this book, but it makes me really want to reread Old Bones, because I really didn't like Nora when I read Old Bones the first time. So I think I'm gonna have to go back and reread that one as I'm going through this kind of extended Pendergast universe. I said earlier that I really enjoyed a lot of this group as a whole. I think their dynamics were really interesting to have, you know, Aragon, with his, you know, zero touch policy, versus Black, who's a lot more intrusive on a scene. I thought that was a really cool dynamic to play off of, to kind of see these two different types of archaeologists, because, I don't know, you're kind of used to just seeing, like, you know, the Indiana Jones type, and so it's, you know, cool to see something that's a little more realistic and something that's a little more down to earth. One character I thought could have potentially been, I don't know, the one character that I think was very, almost zero-dimensional was the chef, Bonarotti. It just seemed kind of weird to me that he was just there, but not really doing anything. He almost felt like an extra in the story. Like, I guess you do need a camp cook, but I don't know. I don't really know why he was there or what he was doing. I mean, this was such a long book. I think something along the lines of like 500 pages. I think a lot of it could have been kind of trimmed down a little. Like I said before, I don't think we really needed Skip's story. I think we spent a lot of time looking at a lot of these characters that end up being fairly one-dimensional and just kind of die at the end. And that might be getting nitpicky, But if you want me to get super nitpicky, the character of Swire was always like eating the ginger snaps, and for some reason they decided to use like a different, more intricate word every time they like described him eating this cookie. And at one point they just say he inserted it into his face. I'm just like, I hate that word choice so much. And the fact that they were so, focused in on how Swire was eating these cookies throughout the story, because it kind of became like a character trait of his, disappearing behind his mustache, slowly luxuriating on this ginger snap. But we hear Sloane described so repetitively and so consistently. So that just kind of stuck out to me with their word choice of, giving Swire all these different phrases for how he ate a cookie. But we heard about Sloane's, what was the word they used for her voice? I don't know. Whatever word they used for her, somewhere between alto and mezzo-soprano voice. And her lazy smile and her dark hair and sharp features. Like, they used the same words for Sloane over and over again to really hammer in her description, but I don't really know why that bugged me so much, but it really did. I really noticed it all the way through. So I'll be interested to see as I continue on with these authors, like how they progress. Because like I said, this Pendergast Universe is expansive. I think Relic was written in 1995, which is the one I'm reading now, and they're still coming out with books that are tied into this universe as a whole. So I'll be interested to see kind of how their storytelling kind of converges together over the course of the years, and kind of how that all works out together. Overall, I think this was a really fun novel. I'm really excited to carry on with Nora Kelly as a whole series. I think she's a really cool, really fun character that I really enjoy reading. And I'm excited to see where this kind of series goes. And like I said, I'm kind of delving into the Pendergast universe now. I'm actually buddy reading the first book with my sister right now. So I will be coming up with a review of that hopefully sometime soon. Thanks for watching.